Hey everyone, hope you're having a great week so far. Apologies, I'm still working on the 101 video. It's a bit of a doozy and goes super in depth, much more so than originally expected. In the meanwhile, I put up a poll to see what hero or spell people wanted featured on the first hero or spell spotlight, and Tomoni received the most votes, followed by Mala and a hero close behind, and then Mingzu and Jargon receiving a little bit of love as well. I'm just sad that Adeline didn't get a single vote. On to today's topic, Tomoni. I'll have some videos rolling in the background to show how I like to use him with different builds. Just keep an eye on where his summons are being cast and how it's disrupting the flow of my opponents. I'm not planning on pausing today since the focus isn't as pace sensitive. Ironically, some of these replays were only available from my opponent's point of view, but that actually helps demonstrate how annoying those summons truly can be. This is one hero that I think is grossly underrated in Castle for several reasons, which I will get to shortly, and we'll kick things off with a brief overview of our hero. First off, the obvious ones here are that he is a light element hero and one of the few summoners in the game that is actually viable in Castle. His HP is nothing spectacular and slightly on the lower side of average, but is more balanced than most heroes in terms of relatively high defense and protection stats. To top it off, his hero power is fairly slow to charge. The relatively slower HP and slow charge might make you think that, bang, something's coming, a glass cannon type of hero, but you would be wrong. It's not coming. That is largely why Tomoni is quite underrated today, as it is a bit harder to see his value. Fun fact, he used to be a rare hero and got some buffs and was promoted to epic. I'll get to why I think he's awesome in Castle in a moment. Next, let's talk skills and gearing. I would maximize Veteran, which gives him plus 30% defense and protection. Guardian Spirit is nice, as it provides some healing, but less important in Castle, at least in my opinion. Spirit Army can also be very nice, but doesn't actually do as much in Castle for you, as you cannot throw those summons up-screen like you can as hero power to stall. In most of the current builds that you would use him to get maximum effectiveness, you also likely would not have him as your party leader. Gearing wise, much like why you maximize Veteran, he isn't as tanky as you would like him to be, so you would build him to withstand as much damage as possible. I guess the alternative to building him for survivability is to go for DPS, and sure, he has magic damage and a decent attack rate, but his base damage is relatively low, and there are much better options out there. For that reason, we are back to using him as a stopper or to hold the line and stall. Next, let's talk about hero power. As mentioned before, it is quite slow, but his summons have good range and are nearly indestructible with over 20k defense and protection. And no, I did not add a 0 to that. They are mighty hard to kill. Now let's talk a bit of strategy. As you're seeing in these clips, basically he's a stall type hero where you use his summons to keep your opponents at bay and buy time. To do this, you want to toss his summons up the battlefield into one of two areas. So one is just behind your enemy's heroes, since they will aggro them and keep them occupied. One way to do this is right after a Neuro Tornado. You've pushed them back and now you want to hold them there with the summons. Second area is as far up the battlefield as possible, so when heroes respawn, they essentially get stuck engaging your summons, and this works best with a DPS team as they force respawns far more often. Okay, you might be thinking, that's all well and good, but how do I fit him into my lineup? Fair question and a challenging one, which is why he isn't a particular popular hero today. You often have to give up something quite strong to fit him in, and I tend to use him in place of Otho for many builds, since he sort of fills the role of a jumping tank. This isn't a perfect substitution, as there are a couple of drawbacks. One being that Tomoni summons don't shift the camera, which is a key part of what makes Otho very strong. Another drawback is that he cannot be dual purpose and stun like Otho does. However, the summons act as having a couple of extra tanks on the battlefield, holding your opponents at bay deeper in their end, while Tomoni helps hold the backline. A final challenge here is that you cannot guarantee your summons will always be ready on time to keep them constantly spawning. Which brings me to my second point. His charge is pretty slow, which is why he works best with a Seppi and Disc. I'll often use him with a lineup such as Neuro, a Seppi, Dare, and a Hero, since the Disc on a Hero is pretty good with his fast attack speed, and he's also light element. And I typically use that build on light element days. You can also swap an Alien for a Hero in that build, since Alien has a higher crit rate due to his precision skill, and has 3 magic slots for resets. That was a long way of saying that if you use him with a Seppi, he gets a ton of mileage, and can actually almost continuously cast his hero power. Obviously, game conditions can impact that quite a bit. He also works really well with a DPS build, as you can mow down your opponents and keep them held at their castle using Tomoni summons. It's also a very fun way to play. I've thrown a lot of information at you guys about Tomoni, but to summarize why I think he's strong is that he has nearly indestructible summons with very, very good range, which gives you flexibility on how to use them, and he can be extremely disruptive for your opponents and really pin them down near their castle. The downside here is that he cannot shift the camera view like Otho does, and does not have the crowd control option, again, that Otho does. But, again, with a Seppi, he can keep those nearly indestructible summons coming almost constantly and constantly pin your opponent down. Now I'm just going to run you through a couple of games and explain the thought process behind how I use Tomoni, whether it is the different lineups or actions that he's taking in these games. This first one is what I would say is more of a balanced lineup. It's got Uwalth for crowd control so I don't fall behind early, and it's also got Mala and Dare for massive amounts of damage output. What you're seeing right here is Neuro using his Tornado, and then I'm tossing my summons in behind the Tornado to aggro my opponents towards them, keep them in place, and allow Mala to cast Fire Stream on them largely unimpeded. It's also important to note that, as you can see, I'm using summons and cycling in crowd control spells, which is really important because I'm not using a Seppi. So the summons are taking a little bit of extra time to recharge, and as a result, I need to keep my opponents pinned somehow. So what you're seeing is very much a process of summons, spells, summons, spells, summons, spells, and so on and so forth. And what you're also seeing is my opponent has to jump to get past those summons or use a Neuro Tornado to get them out of there. At this point, my DPS is starting to really take off, and I'm forcing a lot of respawns in the process. So as you saw, I just tossed some summons right behind where you were seeing on the screen, close to my opponent's castle to keep them at bay. And this gives me the time to say, basically, mission accomplished. I marched Mala into range, and she was able to finish off the castle for me. This next game's a lot of fun. I'm fully committed to DPS. I've swapped out Neuro. I've swapped in Vermeer. I'm really hoping to maximize Mala, Dare, and survivability on Tomoni summons using Frailty. And I'm also focused on keeping my opponent's very strong Dare away from my castle because of her crazy range. So ironically, this strategy actually works quite well. What you'll see in a bit is Otho almost actually is the one that gets me with his auto attack, jumping in behind, getting to my castle, but fortunately my DPS backline was strong enough to keep him from finishing the job. What you just saw is lots of DPS, so I've been mowing opponents down, and I just tossed a group of summons towards my opponent's castle, which, as you can see, is keeping them at bay, even despite the fact that they do have a Dare with high DPS, and as you see, I just tossed it again. So you'll notice I'm cycling a little bit faster on the summons because I've got a Seppi in my lineup, and ultimately those summons pinning my opponent there are what gave me a great chance at actually winning this game. I hope you all enjoyed the video and are maybe even inspired to give our boy a chance and test him out in Castle here or there, even if it is only on light days. Looking forward to the next video, which will either be another hero spotlight, likely Mala or a hero based on the poll, or the 101 video if I can get that beast done shortly. Thank you for watching and have a great rest of your day.